Okay, welcome to my presentation. I'm Vanessa McElroy. Most of you already know that. Let me give you a little background about what I'm doing. I'm in college with McKendree University getting my BSN. I'm in my last two classes right now, so in about 3 weeks I'll be done. That'll be wonderful. One of my last classes is community health nursing, and I had to do 40 hours of clinical somewhere. So I chose to do them at Baptist Occupational Medicine. They have two clinics here. They have one here in the hospital that we used to call Baptist Works, and now it's Occupational Medicine. And then they have one in Calvert City, and I was able to go to both of those. I followed Kim Evans. She's the nurse practitioner there. For my 40 hours, and it was great. It was a good experience because I'd never had any contact with anything like that, didn't know anything about it. Learned a lot. A lot of what they do is physicals, first of all, for employment. They have contracts with a lot of the marine industry, and then the one in Calvert City sees many of the plant workers. They also do DOT physicals, which is Department of Transportation physicals, and all of those are different. They have guidelines that they have to go by for each of those. Everybody has their own standards for the physical and what they have to do. They also have to come back, some of them every year, 2 years, 3 years, something like that, to get a card to be able to keep going, and that just shows that they've been checked out, had everything done. Most of the time, if there is their blood pressure's up, they've gained too much weight, if their cholesterol's high, things like that. Everybody has different standards. They sometimes have to see their medical doctor or get treatment for that before they can get their card approved, so it just depends, but that was interesting. They do lots of random drug screens for people, so you see a lot of that. And the other thing is injuries, of course. That's a big part of what they do. They do workplace injuries. People come in that have had injuries at the workplace, and that was a little different. Kind of had to get used to that because occupational medicine is actually employed by the employer, either the nurse from the plant, the employer, the plant manager. Somebody usually brings them or comes with them, or you're supposed to call them right after you see the patient, and they evaluate the injury and decide what to do. But it's a little different because they are actually working for the employer, so they have to think about the money and everything involved. It's sometimes, I think, maybe treatment was delayed a little bit, but it might have been okay because maybe they got better. For example, if they have some kind of an injury, a lot of times they'll prescribe non-steroidals, ice and heat, and they will have them see what that does for a couple weeks. Then they might try injections depending on what it is. But they're going to do all that before, a lot of times, that they even get an MRI or anything to see what's really going on, which maybe other doctors should do that too. I think we sometimes jump too quick to MRI, which is a very expensive test. They always talk to the employer about it, let them know what's going on. The thing that I did decide, I think, in this is that in the end, everything's done right because the employer wants the employee back to work as soon as possible, obviously, but they also don't want a permanent injury. They don't want anything that's going to cause lost work days later on. And the other thing is that the Baptist Health Occupational Medicine has contracts with all these companies, so they have to really keep a tab on lost work days because the companies will look at that every year. They look at their lost work days and their lost income from that, and they're going to decide on new contracts based on that. So if they're not following through and doing the right thing, getting people back to work as soon as they can, then there can be, they might not get their contract renewed at the end of the year. So there's some dollars and some interest for them involved there too. I want to thank Kim Evans. She's the one that I got to follow there, and also the staff of both the clinics. They were very nice and inviting and helping me as much as they could. Then after I did those 40 hours, I had to do a community presentation. That's what this is. I really should have done it to like lay people at a plant or something, but I had a lot of trouble getting that set up. It was just difficult to find a location and somebody available to do that. So then I got to thinking about my case management buddies and thinking how you all are at a computer all day long. I know because I was doing it for a year and a half. And you are prone to a lot of repetitive motion injuries. I remember when I was doing this job, I had terrible shoulder pain. I had, I guess, tendonitis probably from that. So we'll go on. You have, hopefully, you've already completed your evaluations that I handed out before the presentation, and then after the presentation, I have you complete one of those again. That's just a tool to help me get some kind of feedback and see whether I'm doing any good or not, whether I'm teaching you anything or showing you anything, how much you're learning. Helps me, I guess, get a grip on my teaching abilities. So you have in front of you a slide presentation. I didn't do the PowerPoint, but I have the slides ready for you to look at here, and you can just follow along as we talk. The first slide shows common repetitive motion injuries. Of course, that's after the little slide where I put the funny little person at the computer, because I saw that cartoon somewhere and thought that was really appropriate. That's what I felt like a lot of days, like a nerd in front of the computer all day long. And I know that's how you all feel a lot of the time. Common repetitive motion injuries are the ones we see most often are carpal tunnel, tendonitis, and rotator cuff injuries. So that's what we're going to focus on mainly in this presentation. Carpal tunnel syndrome, it's caused by compression of nerves in the root, these nerves in the wrist. The nerves go through a tunnel, that's why it's named carpal tunnel. And the thing is, some of that is congenital, like with most stuff, because some people's tunnel is a little bit smaller than other people's, so they're just going to be prone to that. So some people could do repetitive key work with a computer forever and not ever get an injury from it, and some people are going to a whole lot quicker. It's also sometimes caused by sleeping position. Some people just sleep where they have their arm in the wrong position. And then we know that most often it's caused from repetitive motion injuries, and that's computer work is a big thing from that. Some of that is from the key work, from using the keys on the computer. Some of it's from the use of the mouse back and forth all the time. The thing that I found interesting when I did my research paper, there was a lot about seamstresses that work in factories, and there was also a lot about lab workers. I hadn't thought about lab workers, but I guess they do lots of work with small specimens, lots of turning the tubes and the knobs using the microscope, lots of, drop in with a little dropper. So there's a lot of repetitive, fine motor things that they do that make them prone to carpal tunnel. And the thing in most of the research that I saw was them trying to swap their jobs or swap what they have to do as frequently as possible so that one person's not doing that same thing over and over and over. Then tendonitis. Tendonitis is actually the inflammation of a tendon, and that can be any tendon anywhere really. The most common ones we see are elbows, knees, wrists, ankles, and shoulders. It's caused by a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is repetitive motion injury. And I told you that I had the shoulder, I think, when I worked in case management. Actually, I had it from when I worked in recovery. It started when we went to computers in recovery, because we had always been charting by hand, and we had those computer on wheels that everybody uses, and I just had a lot of trouble with the positioning of it and wasn't really able to alter it a lot. Another thing that I wanted to throw in is this little paper here that I saw that we got emailed to us at some point in time here at the hospital by, I think, our human resources director, that shows ergonomic safety. I didn't add that to my presentation, but I just thought it was kind of neat that they had done that. It shows common ergonomic injuries, and it lists repetitive motion injuries as one of them. And it gives some tips about how to sit at your work desk right and how to set the position everything where you need it. using mechanical lifting aids as much as you possible. When you're lifting, to lift with your legs, not your back. And then it told about your workstation to adjust your chair height and the backrest, that your feet should be flat on the floor, knees should be level with your hips, and your lower back should be supported. To sit at least an arm length away from the computer. Keep your wrists straight and the elbows at the right angle, and adjust your position and stretch throughout the day, which I really did try to do when I was having to do computer work every day, all day. But it was really difficult for me to find the right position and the right keyboard level and mouse level to do that. But I did try to do that as much as I could. We talked about, I got off just a little bit, we were talking about tendonitis, and now we're going to move on to rotator cuff injury. We've all heard about rotator cuff tears, rotator cuff injuries. The rotator cuff is actually a group of muscles that's here in your shoulder. Any of them can have a tear in them. It can be a small tear, large tear, smaller tears. Tears in the muscle don't heal, but tears in the muscle you can do PT, physical therapy or something, and strengthen those muscles around that tear and keep from having to have surgery. But oftentimes it is going straight to surgery for something like that, and it's very, very painful. I know we've all seen that. Even that, heavy lifting can also cause that. Of course, it doesn't have to be repetitive motion injury. It can be just one really heavy lifting incident. There's some congenital factors that play in that too. Again, I think there is in everything. Some people are just more prone to muscle strain. Probably the shape of the muscle to begin with, how strong it is, plays some part in that. The next slide shows statistics, and they are kind of amazing. 29.6 injury and illness cases per every 10,000 workers causes days away from work due to repetitive motion injuries. And the workers that are off for other reasons, not repetitive motion injuries, usually miss a median of 11 days of work, while repetitive motion injury, people that suffer from that, are usually out 13 days, and that's just an average, of course, overall, taking the highs and the lows. But what that shows is that it takes a little more recuperation time than a lot of the other injuries do. And the staggering factor, I thought, was that 29% of all work injuries are repetitive motion injuries, and that's pretty amazing. So if we could find a way to prevent that or to treat them very early, that would be great if everyone were on board and did what they needed to fix repetitive motion injuries. Then pain and impairment. Most of our discussion is based on work attendance and lost work days, which is very important. And at the occupational medicine facility I worked at, of course, that's the thing that they were taking into account. But the other thing to think about there is the people's personal life, because that's also affected. If you have a repetitive motion injury or any kind of injury and you're off from work, there's going to be financial struggles. You're going to have family problems. If you're trying to care for a child or something, you might not be able to do that. You're going to have duties that you need to do at home, housework or something like that you're not going to be able to do. And I know everybody would be real upset about that. But the thing is, it's the whole person. It's not just their work job, but they're also maybe not going to be able to do the things that they love at home. So it's affecting both lives, and that's why it's really important to work on them. I said that. Then you go on, the repetitive motion injuries, a priority, and lost work days is the next slide. Healthy People 2020 is a website, a group of people who've come together and formed goals that they want done by the year 2020, objectives. So I put on here the Healthy People 2020 objective for repetitive motion injuries, and their goal is to decrease them by 10% by the year 2020. The other organization I looked into was American Association of Occupational Health Nurses, and they have 14 priorities, and repetitive motion injuries or some aspect of them was in 3 of their 14 priorities. One of them is factors that affect worker injury and illness, which it fits into that. Evaluation of interventional strategies to improve worker health and safety, and it definitely fits into that one. And then impact of occupational health nursing interventions on workers' comp claims. So, and that's what we're trying to do. They're trying to do there, decrease the amount of lost work days as much as possible, get the person back to work as quick as possible, as healthy as possible for as long a time as they can. The next thing is prevention of repetitive motion injuries. That's the big takeaway from this, is that prevention is the key, because treatment, once you get a repetitive motion injury, there is treatment, but a lot of the time there's not a cure. It's just treating the symptoms. So, of course, what you want to do is be able to treat it as quickly as possible and get it fixed or prevent it from ever occurring, and then there's not a problem. The first thing we're going to do for prevention is education, which is what I'm doing here, and just educating the employees and the employers that there's things they can do to prevent repetitive motion injuries. In my research that I did on the paper and everything, frequent scheduled work breaks were the best preventative measure that's easy to accomplish. And like in the seamstresses in the factories where they're working long hours, they don't necessarily take their breaks like they're supposed to. So that's a big thing, is just trying to get the employers to assure that the employees are taking their breaks, and making the employees understand the importance of taking those breaks to be able to rest and get that muscle back in shape to be able to go back to the job. The other thing is rotation of staff on jobs. That's a big thing too. If you're having to do something that's just tedious, monotonous with your hands, and it's over and over and over and over, besides taking the frequent scheduled breaks, is trying to rotate jobs. Maybe one seamstress works on this for a couple hours, and then they rotate out with somebody else who's doing a little different jobs, so the movements are going to be different, and they rotate back and forth so it's not continuous all the time. Or even rotating day to day, any kind of rotation that keeps that person from doing the same movement over and over and over every day. Avoid long working hours, and the next one is adequate sleep, which I know we all want to get as much sleep as we can. Avoid long work hours. Those would be ideal things. I know we have to do them sometimes, but those were found to be a tribute to these repetitive motion injuries, because if you don't have enough sleep, if you're tired, working long hours, then you're not going to think, you're not going to be safety conscious, you're not going to pay attention to what you're doing, and sometimes you just want to dive into what you're doing and get it done as quick as you can. Proper back support and good posture is very important in this, especially with the computer work like you all are doing. So you need to look at your chair, get it adjusted at the right height, get a back support if you need it. Assistive devices with carpal tunnel, sometimes they put the splints on, and what that does is just keep you from moving that arm in that motion that's going to cause the most injury for a while. Ergonomically designed workstations, it's also what we were talking about, and that was that little handout that I had that I sent, they sent here, that tells you a little bit of information about that, how to try to set up your workplace, your workstation, so it's the best for you that it can be. The other thing is stretching exercises before and after work, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about it, athletes, people that run or anything like that, that's what they do. They stretch before and after, and they stretch because they know they're going to overwork that muscle. The muscle's going to be cramped up and working, so they're stretching to limber everything out so it doesn't do as much damage or doesn't cramp up on them. Well, the same thing holds true for repetitive motion injury. Even though it's not a heavy physical one big action that's going to cause a lot pain or anything. It's continuous over and over and over again movements that are going to cause that muscle to cramp up and tighten up. So any stretching that you do before to limber it up, and any stretching that you can do after to limber it up is going to help a lot. It's going to save from a lot of injuries or damage. So you need to think about that and figure out a way that you can do that. I didn't see occupational medicine talking to people about that a lot, which I was surprised. But they did send a lot of people to physical therapy, so I'm hoping that that was done there. I wasn't able to follow through and see the physical therapy anywhere, but I'm assuming that was handled there, hopefully. Elimination of any redundant tasks. There might be tasks that you're doing that are redundant that you don't have to do, that you could find another way to do. And that was interesting at occupational medicine. A lot of the injuries from the plants or somewhere, they actually sent a video of the person doing the job they were doing so that they could look at it and make some suggestions about ways to make it better. Moving things around physically, getting a new piece of equipment, alternating the persons doing the job. For example, one fellow who had a shoulder injury, his job involved packing some stuff. He was doing a lot of lifting, moving, and then ultimately putting it in the box and using a big tape thing to tape across the box. And doing that over and over all day long, you can see how that movement would cause some damage. And what it caused on him was a rotator cuff tear, or rotator cuff strain. The other thing is assistive devices. We talked about that, back support, splints, anything that can help you, keep ergonomically right, keep your body, your posture and everything in the way it needs to be. Employee fitness programs, a lot of the plants and places are doing that now, so people can go have some kind of, recreational. We want to look at it as recreational, but what they're doing is getting their body in better shape, getting healthy and getting strong, making their muscles a little stronger, and that's going to help prevent some of this. And then replacement of faulty machines or equipment. We all know that sometimes factories, employers don't want to replace stuff if they don't have to, but once they see the lost work time from it, the injuries from it, that kind of thing, it makes it a little more feasible to them to be able to replace that piece of equipment rather than having a few people off for 8 weeks, 12 weeks or something like that, and then maybe coming back with work restrictions. Because they have to keep up with all that too, the employers, their OSHA, people like that, look at their injuries, their lost time and work time and stuff like that. Why don't people report repetitive motion injuries early? That's something that's hard, that seems silly, but one of the things is fear of losing your job, of course. A lot of people are worried that the employer is going to target them more or less if they know they've got an injury, because they're going to think they're just going to be one of those people that's going to sue them or, be a work comp claim. Decrease in income. Some of us have good benefits and have sick time. Other places don't have that many good benefits, so they might have to be off for a period of time without pay, or their pay might be cut, because sometimes sick pay is not, and even work comp is usually not 100% of what your pay is. So families that are struggling in the beginning are really going to struggle if they're off and they're getting, less, just a certain percent of their pay. Peer pressure, and that sounds silly, but we all know that our peers sometimes make fun of us for not showing up at work, for not being able to tolerate something. We feel like they're just taking off because they want to. There's not really, it's not really viewed as valid always, and probably not because they're not the ones feeling the pain, so we need to get over that. The fear of employer retaliation, we kind of talked about. You're afraid the employer might target you. Even though you got back to work, they might see this as a chance to, kind of label you, and they're not going to fire you for that, but they may label you and look at you later on in a different light, because they're thinking about the possibility of you having this work comp claim. So that's something we all think in the back of our minds. And the other thing is not realizing the importance of early recognition. That's the big thing with repetitive motion injuries, I said, is that they need to be reported early, need to be treated early, because if you can't prevent them, prevention's number one. then you need to treat them early before a lot of damage is done to that muscle, and it's either you can't fix it or you're going to have surgery on it. And then there's that group of us that just feel like we want to work through it, and that probably comes from the people in my age group a lot. We were kind of taught to do that, but I think even a lot of younger people see that. They just want to work through it. They feel if they keep going, it's going to get better eventually. They're going to get used to it or toughen up or something. The next slide is on treatment. And of course, first I put prevention, because prevention is number one. That is what we want to look at, and that's hopefully what we're going to be able, that's what I want to bring out of this, out of my education material. Stretching exercises before and after these movements. We talked about that, doing some kind of stretching exercises. Non-steroidals, that's the kind of the first line of treatment besides rest is non-steroidals, and that's like ibuprofen, Celebrex, Relafin, any of that group of non-steroidals. And the thing with those is you don't take those just when it hurts. You need to take them every day or twice a day, however they're prescribed, for a period of time, because what that's going to do is slowly decrease the inflammation. It's not going to do near as much good to just take it when you hurt. It might help your pain, but it's not going to help the inflammation. Rest in the area, making sure you're not doing that movement again over and over constantly. Therapy, physical therapy or occupational therapy, and occupational medicine is usually going to send these people for something like that, and hopefully they're teaching them the preventative mechanisms too for future occurrences. Massage therapy, that's a big thing that I didn't see a lot in the research, but I know it can be very beneficial. I know when you're getting muscle strain, you get trigger points in your muscles, and massage therapists are really good at working those out, which is just going to strengthen that muscle and make you less prone to have a repetitive motion injury. Heat and ice alternately, just like the sports people do. That's what they do for them, because that's what works. That's what helps decrease that inflammation as quick as possible. And then acupuncture I didn't have on there, but there is a lot of people that choose that. Some of them get benefits from that. Injections, steroid injections is usually the next step after the non-steroidals, and the rest are some type of injections, and those you're either going to get relief from it for a short period of weeks to maybe permanently sometimes, but you do that before surgery. And then the assistive devices like we talked about, the splints or some kind of device to help you. And then the last thing that we want to go to, or we hope we don't have to go to, is surgery. But there is surgery available for most of these things, but the recuperation period from them is usually long. The fix is not necessarily a permanent fix. It's a fix for the symptoms, but you're still going to have to do the preventative measures to keep you from having this again, or causing another injury somewhere else. So people just need to know that surgery is not the end-all, fix-all here. I'm just about at the end of my presentation, and I wanted to thank Baptist Health Occupational Medicine, like I said, here and at Calvert for this experience. It was great. I have my research paper available if anybody's interested. I can give you the references that I found from the research studies is what I looked at. And then while we're wrapping up, I want you all to take the second copy that I gave you of this evaluation tool, this one right here, and use it, fill it out now since you've seen the presentation, so I can kind of have an idea of what you learned, or what I did right or what I did wrong. I will be sending this in to my class, to my instructor, and then I'll also make another presentation for my class, and they will watch it online. So, of course, I didn't do the camera around and film you all because I knew you didn't want to be in a movie today, but I will be presenting this. So if you'll complete the evaluation, and then any questions or comments you got, you can write down at the bottom there. Or does anybody have any questions now? Okay. But if you do, just let me know. Write them on there. If you've got any ideas about how I could have done this better, or how we would have learned better, or any ideas or tips you've got for occupational medicine that you think would help these workers, just let me know. And I want to thank all you all for coming. This is great because I know you all are really supporting me. I got lunch, and I hope that helps a little bit. But and then I want to thank my husband for coming and helping with this also, because he has been a great help in it, and I know he'll be glad when I'm done with this project too. So thank you all for coming.